Hello and welcome to the Chris Wolfe Podcast on iCode Media. Today I'm going to have a great conversation with Dr. Ben Colston. We're going to talk about a number of things. As always, you never know exactly what we're going to get to, but the things that I want to talk about are largely related to adding to your practice and adding to your quality of life through other mechanisms outside of optometry. So please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. So today I want to talk about the MyDay multifocal for just a second. It has been a really great thing in our practice for our patients who are presbyopes of all areas, but you know, those tricky presbyopes are always the ones that are kind of emerging, where they don't want to give up any of their far away vision, but they're having some struggles up close. And so what the MyDay multifocal has been able to do for us is to allow those patients to transition into a multifocal more easily. And then as we have those patients progress into other levels where they need more add powers, it's been a nice smooth transition. So the ultimate hurdle that we've seen in our practice before the MyDay multifocal was that we'd have patients who would resist any transition to a multifocal lens because of that distance blur. We just haven't seen that. So if you haven't started using MyDay multifocal in your practice, I would encourage you to start, check it out, reach out to your Cooper reps for those trial lenses and commit to MyDay multifocal for your patients. I think they're going to like it. If you haven't checked out MacuHealth yet for your patients in Category 1 through Category 4, I think there's a lot of evidence that you should be considering. The first is, if we just look at AREDS 2 and what they talk about, MacuHealth is, so for patients in Category 3 and Category 4 AMD, MacuHealth is a great option for them that follows that entire protocol, and it also adds mesozeaxanthine to the mix, which, if you look at some of the evidence, I believe shows me that it's going to thicken the macular pigment better than without mesozeaxanthine. It also uses the correct AREDS 2 dose of zinc at 25 milligrams, and so you don't have to worry so much about the potential side effects of zinc. The other thing to think about, and it's beyond the scope of this, although you've probably heard me talk on other podcasts, is that in patients in Category 1 and 2, there may be some additional benefit to supplementing them with something that may be a little bit less than the AREDS 2, so you don't have to add as much to it. And that's where I use the MacuHealth LMZ3. And so I think if you haven't done this yet, I'd consider MacuHealth in your practice and for your patients. And it's been great for my patients, and we really feel like we can have the ability to help those patients in all categories of macular degeneration. So Ben, thanks for doing this. It's been a long time coming. And
thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So tell me, so I think for the listeners, it would be good to hear kind of your background in practice before we get into some of the other things that you and your wife have done to kind of expand your reaches in other places. And then we'll talk about whatever we're going to talk about. So give us a little bit of background on you and where you practice and what your practice is like.
Yeah, sounds great. So I graduated optometry school in May of 2017. And right out of school, I worked for a couple of different private practices in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm from Arlington, Texas, which is like right in the middle of DFW. So I practiced with a couple of really, really strong private practices. One was in Dallas and one was in Southlake. And I did that for about a year and a half, and I kind of always knew I wanted to open my own practice. So I ended up opening cold in May of 2019. So it was about 2 years after I'd graduated, and did that. I opened that in Mansfield, Texas, which is kind of a south suburb of DFW.
So Ben, let me ask you, so one of the things that I think a lot of times people are concerned about is they're going to bring on new sharp young docs into their private practice. They're going to teach them about their business. Were any of those doctors, now I don't view this way, but were any of those doctors kind of concerned that you left or upset that you left?
So it was really kind of we had a really good relationship going in, and they knew that I wanted to own a practice. And so part of their pitch to me, so I took a lot less money out of school than I could have. That part of the value that I saw with working for them was they kind of told me, hey, we'll kind of mentor you, we'll help you kind of learn about private practice. they were pretty clear that I wasn't going to own their practices,
Mm.
but they were like, we're open books. Our one doctor actually went over his P&L with me every quarter and just kind of chatted about that. And so I kind of view it as my like private practice residency. I didn't make as much money as some of my peers did, but I didn't care because I was like, man, this is awesome. I'm getting these two great doctors that have these awesome practices. And subsequently, both of them have actually sold out to private equity.
No.
So I think,
well,
I
they
don't
had
know
good
that.
practices.
They had great practices. They didn't tell me this, but I think that both of them kind of knew that that was the plan. And so that's why they were so upfront with me about, hey, Ben, you're not going to buy our practices, because they kind of knew we're selling to private equity. So a year and a half into me.
Were they joined together, or there were two guys that said, we both need somebody part-time, let's come together and get Ben?
So they were not, they knew each other, but they didn't work together. I approached the one doctor in Dallas first, and he was like, I love you, you're awesome, come work for me. I've got 3.5 days that you can work. So I went around and I found the doctor in South Lake, and I was like, hey, I've got 1.5 days that I can work. And he was like, yeah, that's perfect, come do 1.5. So I made a 5 or 6 day schedule kind of for myself. And they both knew that I was working for the other doctor, but they're 40 miles away. So it wasn't a competition issue at all. But I have some people that ask me like, some people that are in school, and I tell them that's the best thing you can do is just find two or however many really good private practices that you can go work for and just learn from them. So that's kind of what I do.
Take you up on that. How many of your peers do you
Not
think?
Many.
That's been my sense recently too. Is I've talked to a lot of people, and they're having a really hard time finding young docs, and they say that it's because the young docs want too much money. Yep. And maybe that's the case. I believe it is, because everybody I talk to says that. But then you're here telling me, no, I didn't. But I know it's been 5 years since you graduated. But you're telling me, no, I didn't want a ton of money right away. I just wanted the experience. So how many Ben Colstons are around right now in your
Probably not very many. So the one really critical part of my story that I didn't share is I got married whenever I graduated from college. So I started optometry school married, and my wife is a CPA, and she had a good job at a big public accounting firm. So we lived off of her income throughout optometry school really easily. So when I graduated, I didn't care what the salary was, because our plan all along was to live off of her income, and everything that I made was going to go to student loans. So I was like, okay, if I'm making 85, if I'm making 100, if I'm making 120, like 85 is still a heck of a lot of money to pound towards student loans. So I just was purely looking for the best experience that I could have, and I knew it wasn't going to be at America's Best or wherever was going to pay me 120. So
how many people then? How many people? I guess it's hard to know, but your experience was kind of unique. So you were able to kind of put all that away and not have to worry about making this big lump. So that kind of makes you unique, right? You got to take the advantages that you get.
Yeah.
What portion of that drive was because of your wife saying, "Look, we got to get rid of this debt. It's not good to hang over our head. Somebody's not going to forgive it all. They might throw you They might throw you a little bit here and there, but it's never going to get close to what you need.
Yeah.
And you're still going to have to pay for it over time anyway."
Yeah, we both were on the same page with that. We both just knew that the quicker we can pay off this debt, the more freedom we're going to have. And so that was our plan ever since we got married. We actually were really really frugal in school and were able to pay down some of my school while I was in school. Um, so yeah, it was a combined effort. But I mean, she's a CPA, so we're both really good at budgeting and just kind of living below our means, and we've kind of just continued to do that. And we haven't had any kids yet, so that's kind of made it easier to continue to live below our means.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. So then you start the practice in Mansfield, right?
yep,
Which is a
Mansfield,
suburb of DFW
right.
and south suburb. So is it on the Fort Worth side or the Dallas side?
So it's right in the middle. So you can take 287 and get to Fort Worth. You can take 67 and get to Dallas. So it
Okay.
is a growing suburb because of that, because you can basically work in Fort Worth or Dallas, and Mansfield would
Okay.
be a place you could live. So it's a really, really good city, growing. Yeah.
And so you picked it because of all those things. You build out, you start your own practice, you start the practice. How's your growth been?
It's been really good. We've been really blessed. The other benefit I had is, so I grew up in Arlington. My wife and I both grew up in Arlington, which is the suburb most north of Mansfield. So Arlington and Mansfield kind of merged together. So I had a lot of just hometown growth. My third grade teacher, my little brother's friend's mom, like my wife's friends, just like random people kind of helped grow my practice quicker than I think normal would. And we have a great location, a great big sign. So we've grown really quickly. And it's been really good. So yeah.
In a pandemic, so you opened a year before the pandemic started. Did it impact you much?
So that was interesting. Yeah. So we opened May of 2019. March of 2020 was when everything shut down. And I think I had an advantage. So we didn't have hardly any overhead because we were a cold start. So I had 1.5 employees, and my rent was low. My loan payback was low. So my expenses were pretty low. And then we stayed open during a lot of the pandemic. And we kind of, when we had people calling, we would say, yeah, we're being really cautious. We're booking our patients really far apart. So you'll be the only one in the building. And, we didn't tell them we're a cold start. So we only have 6 or 7 people coming in, but we just kind of played it that way. And people were like, oh, okay, great. And so we did pretty well during the pandemic. I mean, I had nothing to really base it off of. I didn't really know how I'm supposed to be doing, but yeah, we made it through COVID pretty well, and actually had to hire some people during COVID, weirdly. So yeah, we made it through COVID really well, actually.
I think as you were talking and kind of recounting some of the dates are always weird,
Yeah.
but I think it must have been 3 years. So you must have been just opening your new practice when I met you, when I came down for,
to Texas. You came down to speak at the Vision Source thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And,
I'd probably been open like 3 or 4 months at that point.
But you had already sort of parlayed some of your diversification into properties at
Right.
that time, right? You had just bought one or you were thinking about buying one, right?
Yeah, so we had probably, whenever I met you the first time, so I graduated in May of 2017, opened the practice in May of 2019, and actually, let's see, it was February of 2019 was a crazy year for me and Crystal, me and my wife. So February of 2019, we bought our first our first rental property. February, and then May of 2019 was when we opened the practice. And then in December of 2019, we bought the second rental property.
Yeah.
And those properties. So my thing with real estate is I've never been like my parents didn't own rental properties. Nobody really in my life. Crystal's parents didn't own rental properties. What happened for me is my last year of optometry school, when I was doing my what's it called, the clinical rotations. I was in Hammond, Louisiana, and I was doing an awesome rotation with Dr. Bond and Dr. Roten, and I was by myself. And so, because Crystal was still working in San Antonio, so I was like 3 months by myself. So I read a ton of books, and I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is about real estate. Yes, yep. And that just totally blew my mind, made this light bulb go off. So I made a 5-year plan or 5-year goal at my last year of optometry school. So May of 2017, my 5-year plan was I wanted to own a primary residence, a rental property, a optometry practice, pay off the student loans, and have a kid. And so that was kind of my first like light bulb moment with, oh, real estate is a good investment vehicle. You know, it provides passive income, that kind of thing. So started listening to Bigger Pockets, which is a podcast about real estate. And so we actually bought a rental property before we bought our primary residence and before we opened our practice. So I was working for the two doctors, paid down like 85% of my student loans, and we had some money saved up. And so we bought our first rental property, really small house. It was like 3-bed, 1-bath, like, I don't know, 1,200 square feet, like really tiny. And it was just something that we could afford. It already had a tenant in it. And so we were like, it already had a property manager. So it's called a turnkey, buying turnkey. So we did that, and we still have that property, and it's going really well. And then I guess
let me pause you, because you kind of bought during, if it was 2019, you would have bought before the peak, way before the peak.
Yep.
You were able to weather any, because it was turnkey, you knew that you could make the mortgage payment, pay the property manager, and still probably put something away. Yep. Did you finance that for 15 years, 10 years, 30 years? What was your approach?
It was a 30-year. So all of our real estate is on 30-year notes. And anyways, they're all on 30-year notes, but
no, you're going to say something. You're going to say something about that.
I would love to. We've thought about doing like a 15 or 20-year note, but I read somewhere that you might as well just get it for as long as you can. And then if you can always pay it down sooner. And again, I've only been doing real estate stuff for 3 or 4 years now, so I'm certainly not an expert. There's people listening to this probably that know way more about real estate than I do, but that's why we kind of just chose do it for 30 years and get the payment as low as you can.
Well, 2019, you were pretty much toward the bottom of the interest rates. You could have always refinanced even in 2021 and still probably been super low. So the math on that, it makes a lot of sense. If you can, especially if you can reduce your interest rate and carry it over time, it's going to be probably cheaper money than you can get almost anywhere else, especially now. So, yeah. I think there's kind of a back and forth on that. I've always been a 15-year guy. But I think you can make the case that, it probably for our primary house, for our primary residence, it wasn't, would I rather be paying, I don't know, you go back and forth. Like right now we've got 3.5 years left on our house. We always have paid more. And so that goes away. And when that goes away, we'll basically have it'll be 3 kids in high school and Catholic high school at that time. So it'd be kind of nice because when that payment goes away, then we just can, shuttle it over to the other, and we'll even feel better because we've been paying for 2 in high school for the last, for those 3.5 years. So my point is I don't regret feeling like, oh man, 3.5 years and my house is paid off. But at the same time, like if I want money right now, I had to buy my dad out this year. He decided he wanted to retire, and I had to buy him out. Well, you could probably make the case that had I pushed that money out over time and didn't pay extra, and I saved it, that's the other caveat, right? If I would have saved that extra money every month, then I probably could have just written a check to my dad instead of having to get a business loan, right? Where the business loan was a lot more challenging, only because there's no hard assets. I mean, there's very little hard assets in an optometric business. It's all pie in the sky. It's all goodwill. And so the amount I had to have down anyway was significant. So anyway, like, you can go through all those things. I think the bottom line is like whatever the strategy is should be the strategy, and you adhere to it. And your strategy has been the 30-year modality, and you're just adhering to it, and that's built into the cake, and you're going to continue to move with it.
Yeah, we always, it seems like every 6 months, me and Crystal are like, we look at our portfolio and we're like, okay, so at some point, the plan is to start the Dave Ramsey debt snowball. We're going to we have these properties and these loans on them. And at some point, we're going to say, okay, we're going to start hammering down one, then we're going to hammer down the other. But we're I guess we're more comfortable with debt than maybe a lot of people are, because, the mortgages on the rental properties are all being paid down by other people, and they have good cash flow. So we're getting comfortable with that. And then
what's your assessment of that risk though? So like you're comfortable with it, but you've done some sort of risk assessment of the value of that cash flow. So where's your downside there? Like if this goes wrong, where's it going to go wrong?
So we've kind of played through the worst case scenarios. We have 3 month. On the long-term properties, we have 3 months, and on the Airbnb properties, we have 4 months of all of our expenses kind of saved up. So we have lots of cash reserves for each property. But I got distracted. What were we saying? So,
just you post-mortem it or you pre-mortem it.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good way to think of it.
What's going to happen?
And so, and the value of the homes have gone up. So in a worst case scenario, we sell our houses off and we can get cash. We can pay our loans off. I think in a worst case scenario, we would just sell. But what if you can't sell? I don't know.
Well, so then you take into account, so you bought in 2019, so you didn't get the peak. You probably could look at these properties right now and get out. But, and put a whole bunch of money aside. Then the question is, where are you going to put their money, right? What are you going to do with it? And then there's probably tax implications. But, you go down to 2019, I think, not knowing a ton about real estate, I would guess that I think we were in a bubble. I think we're still in a bubble. That's coming down a little bit from the people I've talked to about it. But I don't think the bubble seems like it's going to completely implode like 2008. Maybe it goes down and retracts a bit to 2019, 2018 values. But if it does, you still have put enough away to weather that storm. So then even if you have to sell it, you could sell it at a lower price and still walk away. Yeah.
You've lived through more real estate changes than I have, but, so yeah, because didn't you graduate like right around 2008? So 2008. So you have a different perspective than me. I don't really know what that looked like, but I mean, I kind of do, but not really. But yeah, so it'll be. I just feel like real estate is, and this is probably just my naive. I have only had real estate for 4 years, brain talking, but I just think it's a pretty safe investment. It seems like most of the wealthy people that I know have properties, and time is on my side. I can hold these for a while, and it's also just kind of a fun thing to keep my brain off of eyeballs all day long. Like me and my wife really enjoy looking at deals together. We enjoy the remodeling process.
Do you manage that remodeling? Do you actually do it, or do you have somebody else that comes in and does it?
So for the properties that are not where we live, we have someone else come and do it. The only remodeling that we're doing ourselves is on our primary residence. So we bought a really, really old 1970s, all original everything house in Arlington, and we're living in it and remodeling it as we go. And we're laying the floor, we're doing the sheetrock, we're doing it all, and it's been fun. It's a lot of work, but it's been a lot of fun. So, but
yeah. So now you're up to, you have an Airbnb, two Airbnbs, and then a primary rental property, or two primary rental properties.
So we have two what we call long-term rentals, just normal long-term rentals, and then we have three Airbnbs.
Yeah. And so then how many do you want to amass?
So that has changed. So originally our goal was we want to have, so originally it started off, we're just going to buy these long-term rental properties. We don't really know what we're doing, but we want to get in the game. We want to get in the real estate game. So we did that. And then we opened the practice, and then we got the itch to get an Airbnb. And so Fredericksburg, Texas is a little wine country part of Texas. Not many people know about it unless you live in Texas. But it's a cute little town that a lot of people travel to. You drive there from Houston or Dallas or Austin or San Antonio. So that's where we got our first Airbnb. And it started because a group of us from our church, we went down there for just a weekend getaway, and we were trying to find a house to rent an Airbnb, and they were all so expensive. Like the nightly rates were insane. And the one we ended up booking was like a crappy house. And so on the way back, we were all talking about, gosh, we should buy a house and just have it as an Airbnb down here. So the ball got rolling, and 6 months later, we bought one. Me and Crystal did, and it wasn't a traditional house. It wouldn't be a great house to live in. The garage has been converted, so that's what we like to do with Airbnbs. Is we find houses that are really undervalued, because a lot of the people that are buying them for primary residences aren't looking at them. So they have the garage is converted on this first one, and it's that's really the only problem with this one is the garage is converted, but it's great for an Airbnb because that's more beds.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah, nobody cares. So that's how we got into the Airbnbs, and then we were like, wow, this is awesome. We love having this Airbnb. It was difficult. We had to furnish it. There's some stuff with that we learned along the way. So getting back to what's that?
About furnishing them?
That was difficult?
About furnishing them? What was the problem with furnishing the Airbnb?
Well, so Fredericksburg is 4.5 hours away from DFW. So we bought all of the furniture in DFW, and we just kind of stored it in our garage or in our house, in extra bedrooms in our house. And then we loaded up a U-Haul, drove it down to Fredericksburg, unloaded it, got everything set up. So I guess it wasn't really a problem. It's just kind of a lot to furnish a 3-bedroom house in a weekend. And that can be really expensive, but we did a lot of Facebook Marketplace grabs and stuff like that.
Do you put in all the amenities of, like, we've stayed at Airbnbs before where, well, first, two things that I think about. One, we did in Orlando, which was great. Actually, we did it on Space Coast. We did it at Cocoa Beach, which was awesome. And then we did it again we did it in California right before the pandemic. And then we did it again in Arizona this last winter. And so one of the things I think that I noticed in Arizona was in the neighborhood that we were in, probably like 5 or 6 signs in the yard that was like Airbnbs bring down property values, or short-term rentals are bad for communities. And I was like, wow, okay, well, I don't feel very welcome. But I don't need to, because I just go in the backyard and hang out. The other thing that I thought was really cool, and I wonder if you do this, was just the Wi-Fi-ization of the entire house, controlling the lights, the air conditioning, even the locks, so that like the ones that are the best, when we've gone to them, it's like you get a text, here's the code always changes, and like everything starts working. Have you done that?
Yep. Yeah. So that was part of the big learning curve with the first Airbnb is and my wife really is the one that does all this, but she's figured out the automation. So when you book our property, there's automatically get a message that's like, hey, we're Ben and Crystal. We're excited to have you at our house. And I found that the more like personal you can make it, the better they treat your house and the better they leave good reviews, because they know, oh, we're staying at this couple's house and here's the picture of them and they look nice. Like, let's not mess up their house. So we automate that. And then they get another message the day of check-in that's automated, and it has the code. And yeah, we have the Yale lock. That's like that is critical. I don't know how anybody would do it with a key. I mean, that just seems...
You'd have to live there. You'd have to live right next to it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. So, and then we've got a Nest thermostat. So if they leave the AC cranking after they leave, we can turn it up. But that's about it. We don't have like lights or anything, but we have our cleaner goes in. We met our cleaner, and her husband is a handyman. So they are like super helpful for our Fredericksburg properties. So she goes in and does a clean. Oh, but there is also an automation for her. So the Airbnb calendar is linked with this other app called Turnover B&B. And so so we don't even have to message our cleaner and say, hey, someone's staying this week. Like, she just automatically knows that. So
cool.
And learning that kind of was like, oh my gosh, like we can scale this. Like, so going back to your original question about like the goal, we originally wanted to have, 5 or 6 in different areas that we would want to go, like on vacation. Well, that has kind of shifted, and we did our Fredericksburg one, and then we did a second Fredericksburg one that's literally like around the corner, because it was a great deal. We were like, we've already got the cleaners set up, like this will be a pretty easy second thing to add. And then we did a third one in California, and that has been kind of a kick in the gut. Like, it's not been as good as the Fredericksburg ones.
You want to run away from California.
You're
like the only Texan who has decided to buy property in California
literally,
instead of the other way around.
Yes. So
every time I go, I was there last week, 2 weeks ago, and I actually, San Diego, as much as maybe I shouldn't say this because I get invited there often, but as much as I dislike California in general. I love the people in California. The people that I encounter, optometrists. I love optometrists, and optometrists in California are very similar to optometrists other places.
Yeah.
But I really like San Diego. But every single time I go, even like no matter where I'm at, San Diego, Sacramento, San Francisco, everybody complains about the regulations. And I can only imagine the regulation. I had to sign to get my rental car. I had to sign an acknowledgement that the fumes from the rental car could be could cause some other sort of problems. I'm like, just a gas powered car.
Yeah. So that has kind of and the time zone thing was tough. So like it'd be 10 o'clock and a guest would message us and it's midnight Texas time. So that one we have actually handed over to a property manager, which is better. It's not impacting our life. We don't hate it as much because the property manager's handling a lot, but it has affected our cash flow. So instead of having cash flow, we're basically just covering the mortgage and all the expenses, which if that was our plan going in, a lot of people may say that's great. You've got a property in California that you can go to whenever you want and the mortgage is being paid for. But we're not in that place where we want that. We really are wanting cash flow, monthly cash flow, which we're getting from Fredericksburg. So that kind of changed our goal. And I don't think we really want to have it's just stressful. Like that just, I don't know. Some people can maybe handle that, but with the practice, and so we don't want to have multiple states anymore. I think a lot of people do, but we don't, that's not our goal anymore. So our goal has evolved. Right now, I honestly don't even know what I would say our real estate goal is. We just we bought a second optometry practice. So that's kind of that's taken all of our mental energy and everything. So the real estate has kind of taken a back seat. We're just kind of we're working on our primary residence. And that's been fun, but yeah.
So let me ask you, this is the last one because I threw it out there, but I didn't have you didn't respond to it. The locals in your short-term rentals, the people who are permanent residents, have permanent residence there. What are their thoughts about you, or about, you ever get any problems with that?
Yeah. So Fredericksburg is a unique city. And this is, if you read any Airbnb articles, should I buy an Airbnb? This is one of the top things they always say to look for, is make sure that the city is pro tourism. And Fredericksburg is a city that is built around tourism. So I haven't found much. I mean, they have town hall meetings, and there's a few Fredericksburg locals that are against it. But I would say most of the people in Fredericksburg also own Airbnbs, or they own a bed and breakfast. So we've owned them for I guess 2.5 years, and there hasn't been any discussion about changing the short-term rental laws. The California one's the same way. So it's in, I don't know if you've heard of like Stagecoach and Coachella, like they're big music festivals. I'm not a music festival guy at all, but that's the big draw where our California house is. And so I don't see that changing. I think it could be a problem in Orlando or these places that are tourist destinations, but also have a lot of primary residents. That's where I don't know. I guess long answer to your question, but we haven't had that issue, thankfully. But
I mean, the only place I saw it was Arizona, and it was because the house we rented was in a, it just looked like a normal neighborhood,
Yeah.
In Cocoa Beach, it was a beach neighborhood. So I think it was built into the cake. A lot of tourism, people understand that this is how it's going to work, and they're fine with it. And then same thing, Long Beach, California. I got the sense that same thing. They there was enough of it that nobody really cared that much.
Yeah. It's an interesting. That's kind of the risk with having I guess our backup plan, if that happened, is we could always turn our Airbnb into a long-term rental,
right.
Or sell it or whatever. But yeah, it's been. Have you ever looked into any real estate at all? Personally?
Not seriously. Yeah. I mean, my real estate aspirations are more for profession, or for like commercial,
yes,
as opposed to residential. But I've thought about it, but just not seriously. And every time I do, I've not gotten past the logistics of, if somebody calls and needs this fixed, I'll have to have a property manager, and because I'm not going to be available to go do something or coordinate anything. And then, but you're saying, and this makes me at least think a little bit more about it, is just that, that you can build in the cost of all those things, and then, you're still on the plus side with cash flow. And to that extent, it's something that does interest me. I just haven't ever crossed that line.
Yeah. Have you read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
I have. Yeah. It's been a long, I've,
Yeah.
yeah. And he must have written another book recently because he's been on a number of podcasts that I listen to. And maybe it's just because, he's predicting kind of this crash that's impending with inflation and those sorts of things. But, so that might be why people are reaching out to him, but he's still doing it. He sounds a little repetitive because I'm not sure if he's forgetting what he said, or he just has the same message over and over and over again. I probably sound the same way too. I just have the same message.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So I have read it. Short answer to your question.
Yeah. That book was the one that really made me think, oh man, like I actually do want to have property, but it's definitely something that I've had to also balance that with, we're not building a kingdom on earth. Like, what are we doing? Like, moth and rust can destroy all this. And so I think I leaned into it a little too hard. 2019 and 2020, I was like, man, like, let's get as much property as we can. And I'm kind of having to realize, there's a lot more to life than real estate.
What I like about the story is, and I can relate to definitely, is just the diversification of your brain. And I think there's a lot to be said about thinking about different things, learning about new things. Kind of, I think they help your primary business. And then I also think that it gives, for some of us, not all of us, but for some of us, we need I'll call it a distraction. That's not the right word, but you need the compartmentalization of your brain skills in different areas. Now, it can be bad. I've seen it. I've seen it been really bad where people think that they can do all the things because they're good at this one thing, and then it ends not good. But I think if you can, having the ability to have sort of these silos and these pockets where you get to use your brain differently, I think it'd be really beneficial. I think it can prevent burnout if you realize what you just said is that what are you building here? What are you trying to build? If you're conscious of it and say, look, I like to do these things. Like for me, I like to have conversations with people that I get to learn from, and I like sharing messages about optometric practices, and I like to share ideas and think about new ways of doing things. And I think that helps my practice, but it also allows me to think differently and present differently. And so, certain times come around and my new silo gets to work a little bit. And then by the time I'm getting a little bit tired of that silo, then I can kind of come back to the other one. And so that message that you're talking about does speak to me, but I also, I think I'm getting better at it, but realizing that, you can't take it with you. And so you've got to be able to enjoy some things. It's not all about just amassing, a bunch of stuff that doesn't really mean anything, as long as it has a goal for it at the end where you can serve your higher, serve the Lord and help get your family to heaven. Right. So
that's another like super cool thing where we've pivoted away from the long-term rentals to the Airbnbs. Is the Airbnbs have allowed us to be a huge blessing to other people. Like we've had a couple that they just had a baby. Well, I guess the baby was like a year. It was like a year and a half years old, and they really just hadn't gotten away. And so we offered them our house, and they went down to Fredericksburg for the weekend. And we've done that for a few other friends that just want to get away, but they don't want to spend a lot of money. It's like, hey, go stay at our house. So it's a cool, like another variable with real estate that allows you to be a blessing that maybe a long-term rental wouldn't. I mean, I guess you can be a great landlord and still bless your tenants, but it all just goes back to where's your heart at. But having multiple things for your brain to work on has been so helpful for me. I think if I was an optometrist, really even so, you kind of have the clinic aspect, you have the business owner aspect, and then you have the real estate aspect. You've got the podcast, you've got your billing coding company, and I just think it's fun to have multiple things going on.
Yeah, I agree, and it's not for everybody, but I agree. It's what prevents. It's certainly what prevents my burnout. So let me do this. you've been now to 2 F3 workouts with me, correct?
Yeah, one. The second one, yeah, I missed the second one.
Have you been in Dallas yet then?
I haven't looked into it in Dallas. I'm sure there is one. I mean, there's got to be one. Yeah.
Well, do you remember your F3 name?
I sure do.
Okay, so we're gonna close this since you're an F3 brother. We're gonna close this that same way. So I'll start and then I'll let you finish. Okay. So Christopher Wolfe, 41, cataracts.
Ben Colston, 32, flipper.
All right, Ben, thanks for doing this, man. It was a ton of fun.
Thanks so much, Chris. This was awesome. I really appreciate that you do these. I think you're doing awesome. I love listening to them what do you do, every couple of weeks or every month?
Every week. Still
every week?
Every Monday.
Okay. Yeah. I love it, dude. I love it. Thanks so much for having me on, Chris.